Disc 2.
The type of things we were getting back then. But anyway, Bergoglio even boasts that he is the first pope that would be formed by the Second Vatican Council through Vatican II. And the best biography on Pope Francis is Oltyn Library's. It's called The Great Reformer, Francis and the Making of a Radical Pope. Now, Library is completely in league with the new program, and that's kind of what makes this book valuable, because things that we would report about that would horrify us, he's giving a standing ovation as he's telling us about it. But anyway, he says in praise of Bergoglio, he says Vatican II would be Bergoglio's greatest teacher and the single greatest source later of his pontificate. In the seminary in Argentina, he was part of a group of seminarians who read the Buenos Aires Catholic magazine Criterio. It was edited by this brilliant young, progressivist. And here's what this man did, the editor. I'm quoting now, he channeled through its pages the new streams of thinking from France. And there were other luminaries that were writing at the time that actually ended up to be in the South American hierarchy, but we don't have to tell you any. But anyway, Vatican II ended 1964, and it was George Bergoglio's constant reference point. And Library writes against those who spread this idea that Bergoglio was some sort of conservative, and the myth that when he was provincial, he wanted to take the Jesuits back to pre-council. He says, if you read Bergoglio himself, you will not find this. You will find a different picture. Bergoglio believed and believes in a church that is shaped by the periphery. Key point, we're going to get to that. A priest named Father Goma, who was with young Bergoglio at the Collegio Maximum, where they studied, he remembers that for many of them, the council was like a personal devotion. He and George Bergoglio followed it closely, very much devoted and enthused about Vatican II. And the two of them, Goma and Bergoglio, they would publicize bits about the council on the bulletin board in the Maximo. And everybody was very excited about this, to the point where the things that they published, people from different religious houses and parishes and convents, they wanted these things that were being disseminated through Bergoglio and his friend. Now, there's another Jesuit, Montes, who later became the Jesuit Provincial in Chile, and he was with Bergoglio during his years of formation, and he says that Bergoglio, quote, is on the side of those who wanted a more open church, not a church of resistance to the world. That's code language for Bergoglio wants to be the church to be counter-syllabus. He doesn't want the syllabus of Pius IX. Now, the key thinker in Bergoglio's ecclesial life, whether it be in his younger days or even as a bishop or even as a pope, is the prominent theologian of the New Theology, Father Yves Congar. Library writes of Bergoglio, quote, his lodestars have been two French theologians, Yves Congar and Henri de Lubac, who taught him how to unite God's people by a radical reform that will lead them to holiness. Okay, that's a promise that doesn't deliver, but that's what he believes. Now, how does this radical reform work? De Lubac gets some mention, even Romano Guardini, I think he's basically an existentialist Catholic, gets some mention, but the main man is Yves Congar. Here's how Bergoglio understands how the church should work, how it should reform itself, and it comes from Congar's 1950 book, True and False Reform of the Church, and it's said that this book was the book that really framed John the 23rd's approach to Vatican II. I've lost something here. Here we are. Also, just as an aside, back in the early 90s, I remember reading an interview with Cardinal Siri in 30 Days magazine. And in this interview, Siri says that he walked into Pius XII's office, and on his desk was Congar's book, True and False Reform. And Papa Pacelli says to Siri, what do you think? And Siri said in some elevated Italian manner, just trash it, throw it away, it's useless. But this is Bergoglio's lodestar. Now, Congar's idea is about going out to the periphery. Those who read Francis, you're going to hear this term a lot, the importance of going out to the periphery. But it's much more than going out to the periphery. Those in charge of the church, those in high place, must go out to the periphery, tap into what they're feeling and what they're thinking, and then use that periphery and bring it in so it forms and reforms the center. Now, anyone who knows anything about Pascendi knows this is textbook modernism. Textbook modernism. Okay? Pius X condemning the idea that we have to look to the laity as the source of progress in the church. Congar would refine it a little more than that. If he's pressed, he would be clever enough to sidestep it. But that's basically what's happening here. And I think Congar's call to go out to the periphery and not be guided by this centrist center, I think it was rather self-serving. Remember, this book was written in 1950. Who was in trouble with the center in 1950? Yves Congar. Who was in trouble with the center in 1950? de Lubac. Who was in trouble with the center in 1950? Bouillard. All the comrades of the New Theology were on the periphery. And this nasty, inflexible as a frozen turkey, centrist Vatican would not bend. They are not letting us inform and reform them. Ultimately, I think it was self-serving. I could be wrong, but anyway, that's how I read it. But how does it work for Bergoglio? I'll quote what Ivory says. True reform comes about through the periphery being allowed to shape the center. And Congar claims reforms have only succeeded within the church are those that have been made with the concern for the concrete needs of souls and a pastoral perspective aimed at holiness. Partially true. And this does not mean, he says, abandoning essential Catholic traditions such as Eucharist and prayer. Now, we would read that. Remember, these modernists are very clever. You really can't catch them on heresy. It's a problem with Vatican II, too. Very clever. You can't catch it on heresy a lot of times. You can, but anyway. But it might sound good, but there is a modernist sleight of hand going on. And we can get an idea what Congar really means by this reform when we take a look at the reform that he favored, the reform that he backed, the reform that he was all in favor of. Okay, the Eucharist, essential Catholic tradition. He doesn't say the Latin Tridentine Mass is essential Catholic tradition. The Novus Ordo has the Eucharist, therefore it is part of the essential Catholic tradition. In a new package for the sake of modern man. Catholic social teaching, essential Catholic tradition. But not the syllabus of errors of Pius IX. That's passé. Cardinal Ratzinger said that. It's passé. Fulfilled its deeds and it's done. Now we're in the phase of Catholic social teaching being the counter syllabus. Legitimate reform. The papacy is essential Catholic tradition, an essential element of the faith, but we will introduce collegiality and synodality so that the power and decision-making of the papacy is not going to be trapped in one man, but going to be spread out a little more democratically through the church. So this is the emphasis on the periphery on which Bergoglio operates. Now, what did he do when he came to be pope? He set up this C8, I think it might be C9 now, of these cardinals who would help him reform the Curia. Reform is a dangerous word. If Archbishop Lefebvre reformed the Curia, it would be something to celebrate. When this man starts to reform the Curia, watch out. But here's what Ivory says. First of all, the C8 cardinals include cardinals from India, Germany, the Congo, the United States, Australia, Honduras, and Italy. And Ivory says, you'll see the connection. Thus, by a stroke counteracting the dangers defined by Congar, when the church personnel are selected from a certain type, usually a safe pair of hands, who defend fidelity and tradition but take no risks and cause no surprises, the thinking, the institutions ends up placing a barrier between the center and the periphery. The C8 cardinals bring the periphery, the continents of the world, into the center, offering perspectives other than those of the Holy See. And that's Cardinal Rodriguez of Honduras had said that. Now, of course, the Pope receiving input from the four corners of the world, that's what the College Cardinals is all about. It's to advise the Pope, okay? But The point is not so much the emphasis now is we have to have members of the world inputting. But the problem is these prelates throughout the world, well, they don't necessarily have the Catholic faith. So what's their input going to be? This is the problem. Not so much having a group like this internationalized, but the fact that now the theology and the formation is so fragmented, you don't know what's going to come out of these men's mouths. Like Cardinal Marx of Germany, you probably read about this, a young traditional Catholic came up to him and said, Cardinal Marx, we have to be more concerned about the immutability and the purity of doctrine. You know what Cardinal Marx said to him? Young man, you keep talking like that, you're going to end up a terrorist. This is the type of man advising Bergoglio. Okay, now, so when we have this triumph of the new theology, this fragmentation of the faith, this type of thing is beyond dangerous. It will only increase the chaos, the confusion, and the fragmentation. So, stepping back a little in time, Bergoglio lived this going out to the periphery his entire ecclesial life. He was a great proponent of what you would call the slum priest, the priest going out to the poor. And again, nothing wrong with that. Go out to the poor, help these people who are living. I mean, I don't know if we in the United States have understand the full brunt of the devastating poverty in Mexico, South America. Okay, makes perfect sense to me that priests would dedicate themselves to this. Okay, but in helping the poor, and throughout history we've had this. We had Father de Smet, we had Father Nelson Baker, we had Saint Vincent de Paul. You don't corrupt dogma in the process. You don't corrupt morals in the process and say, well, these people have real problems, and divorced and remarried Catholics, that's the small and stupid stuff. So we don't care about that. You don't corrupt morals in the process. You don't corrupt Catholic social teaching in the process. You don't corrupt the Catholic Mass in the process. But this, in the guise of helping the poor and being compassionate, go out to the periphery, this is used as an instrument of revolution and deformation. Now, here's the interesting thing, too, and this is why you have to know what you're dealing with when you're dealing with, here, Father Bergoglio. Father Bergoglio, this going out the periphery, actually had a positive element early in his ecclesial life for which he was hated by his fellow Jesuits. Father Bergoglio was made provincial in 1973. He even says, I was 39. The Jesuits are crazy to put a young man like this here. But they did it. They did it, and they had to suffer the consequences. But even back in the 70s, Father Bergoglio saw that, well, let me explain it this way. Father Bergoglio insisted that in the provincial houses of the Jesuits, what do these Jesuits had to do? They had to say the rosary. He wanted novenas. He wanted litanies. He wanted the benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. He wanted all this prayer life. Why did he want it? Because when he looked out to the periphery, when he looked out to the poor in the slums, what were they doing? They were kneeling down in front of their Blessed Mother statues. They were praying their rosary. They were making novenas. They were chanting the litanies. They were doing all these things. And he basically said, well, if we want to be informed by the periphery, we have to absorb and keep these devotions. Well, the Jesuits were right through the roof. We have these snooty intellectual Jesuits and all this medieval claptrap that was put into that magnificent electric trash compactor known as Vatican II, and we don't need this anymore, and we are above this, and we are beyond this, and this Bergoglio creature is making us say the rosary in 1974? So he was hated by the Jesuits for it, and they managed to get rid of him. He was exiled for a while. Too big of a story to go into. He eventually was brought back. But at the same time, when the Jesuits were bunking him out because of these traditional devotions, he was also instrumental in crushing a movement of traditional Jesuits that were forming in Spain. There was a group of Jesuits in Spain, I forget their name, but they were really upset with Father Arrupe, who was the very liberal superior general. They were upset with this Marxist and preferential option for the poor emphasis on the Jesuits. They were upset with a lot, Vatican II, the whole thing. And they were writing to Paul VI, and what they wanted is they wanted to form a separate province answerable only to the Pope, and that would be free from the rest of the Jesuits. Of course, they requested it from Paul VI. No surprise, he refused them. But now, General Congregation 32, is that the one, 32? Where am I? I think it's 30. No, General Congregation 32 is coming up to Rome. The Jesuits are going to converge there, and this group of Spanish Jesuits got on the train to go to Rome to make their... And also, they had sympathizers in Rome. There were still enough prelates, conservative prelates in the Curia and in the Vatican that they would get a hearing. So Father Arupe dispatched Father Bergoglio and another priest. Now, Father Bergoglio was actually technically the superior of one of the priests involved with this movement. Bergoglio went out to the Termini train station in Rome. I'm sure a number of you have been there. Met them there and persuaded them to go back home. And Ivare credits Bergoglio with crushing this hopeless restorationist movement in the Jesuits. So, he says Bergoglio, quote, had little patience with restorationists as he did with Marxists. Okay, two extremes. Now, as for the periphery, one of the things is because Bergoglio was basing things on just the activities of the poor, then even in insisting on the practicing of these devotions, he was right for the wrong reasons. And because so much is based on the periphery, this is also going to send him down the wrong road. Because at the same time, in the 70s, he was all for traditional devotions. Well, as Archbishop of Buenos Aires, a number of years later, decades later, he would preside, you can see them on the internet, on YouTube, he would preside over these rootin', tootin', rockin' pop youth masses with the drums and the girls dancing and all this business, because this is what makes the periphery happy. This is what they want. This is what draws them. Therefore, we should do it. And this is why, too. See, this understanding of him going out to the periphery explains so much of his behavior. It's why he leaps over the Pope-mobile and goes running after the crowd. It's the reason why he stands and takes selfies with the teenagers, okay? This is a means of connecting with the ordinary people without this blasted curia blocking my way. Going out to the periphery is also an attempt to shed what he calls this distant clericalism of being distant from the people. The shepherd must smell of his sheep, he says. You shouldn't be up in some castle looking at the sheep from down there. It's a caricature, of course, but this is how they operate. He should smell of his sheep. So the reason why he rode the subway when he was in Buenos Aires. It's also the reason why he talks so freely to journalists. He says we shouldn't have these barriers. The journalists should just be able to ask me anything they want. Well, if you had a Pius X, maybe I wouldn't mind that. But this man, Germain Grisey, moral theologian, now, I've never heard Germain Grisey, very careful, never heard him ever criticize a post-conciliar pope. He basically says that when Bergoglio talks to these journalists, he sounds like a man talking who has just finished a fine meal with lots of wine. That's how Grisey sees it. So anyway, going out to the periphery. Now, what else is this periphery? What else do we see with the going out to periphery? It means going out to get the marginalized. Those who are not accepted by society, and also by extension, those who are not accepted, quote unquote, by the church, such as divorced and remarried people. We need to find a place for them without them having to change, is really what it is. This is why he receives the transgender person, a transgender person, whom he embraced and said publicly, you are a son of the church. I didn't hear him say, go and sin no more. Okay, you are a son of the church. Okay, and he is oblivious to the raging, fang-dripping homosexual movement who pretty much want us dead. They hate us, and they're going to use Bergoglio's actions of embracing homosexuals, and they're going to use that against us. He seems to be oblivious of all that. So, this center being formed by the periphery, again, is the heart of Francis's idea of collegiality and synodality. We're starting to come to the end here. Now, there is much to focus on in the synod regarding divorced and remarried people, but too few people are paying attention to what's coming down the pike after this. Now, for years, in giving these talks, I've been saying that we are only in the early stages of the Vatican II revolution. There is many more changes to come. People think that Vatican II took the pre-Vatican II church, which was a fixed form, and then transferred it to a new, improved, fixed form. No, in evolutionary theology, in evolutionary philosophy, in evolutionary thinking, there's no such thing as a fixed form. For those of you who have a little philosophy, in evolutionary philosophy, there is no such thing as a formal cause, and there's no such thing as a final cause. There is just movement and movement and movement and movement. And so this is what we are facing within the Catholic Church. Constant movement. If this thinking is allowed to continue. Now, what's coming down the pike is a restructure and reformation of the Catholic Church itself. This is based on the modernist thinking of people like Cardinal Martini, Archbishop John Quinn, Cardinal Lehman, and of course, your friend and mine, Walter Cardinal Casper. Have any of you heard of something called the St. Gallen Group? Anybody? Well, I'll be publishing it in Catholic Family News next month, but I'm talking about it here. A number of bishops complained that John Paul II was too conservative. He's running the church like a monarchy. He's interfering with the decisions of the Conference of Bishops of a given country like the United States, or what you would call the supranational Conference of Bishops like they have in South America. All the South American bishops get together at Aparecida to form these documents and things, okay? And they are upset that Ratzinger is too conservative because Ratzinger says that the universal church is of higher good than the local church, okay, which means that the head of the universal church, the Pope, might have to step in and fix something that's in the documents or in the workings of a national church, a national bishops' conference. This actually happened in South America, that John Paul II had to step in because they were going too far. So Bergoglio and those like him would say that we need a further development of the Council's teaching on collegiality to give the national bishops' conferences more autonomy from Rome. Again, we're keeping the essentials, as Congar would say, but we're restructuring it for the alleged needs of the time. And we need more collegiality and synodality to have the world's bishops involved in policy making and decision making for the church. We can't have this old-fashioned monarchical top-down, but it has to be more democratic and collegial. Now, Synod, 1999, Cardinal Martini, who I quoted earlier, he publicly called for more collegiality and more synodology as an approach to church government. It did not go down well with John Paul II's Vatican. Even he would not go that far. But with Bergoglio, what we're going to see is him being admirer of Martini, as we're going to see. They want to take this new structure to its full romping point. In the interview that Papa Bergoglio, Pope Francis gave with Eugene Scalfari in La Repubblica, October 2013, here's what Francis says. Now listen, based on everything I've said so far, listen to what he says. I'm not St. Francis of Assisi, and I do not have his strength and his holiness, but I am the Bishop of Rome and the Pope of the Catholic world. The first thing I decided was to appoint a group of 8 cardinals to be my advisors, not courtiers, but wise people who share my own feelings. This is the beginning of a church with an organization that is not just top-down, but also horizontal. When Cardinal Martini talked about focusing on the councils and the synods, he knew how long and difficult it would be to go down that direction, gently, firmly, and tenaciously. Okay, he's just told us his program. Now, the St. Gallen's group was a group of bishops reacting against this Vatican interference in the national bishops' conferences. It was organized by Bishop Ivo Furer, F-U-R-E-R, from Switzerland, the Diocese of St. Gallen's, group of progressivist prelates who were working again for this more collegial, horizontal, synodal approach to the church. Its main members consisted of course, Jesuit Cardinal Martini, whom Bergoglio called a prophetic figure, a father for the whole church. Cardinal Godfrey Daniels of Belgium, another liberal, another modernist. Carl Lehman of Mainz, another modernist. Cardinal Cormac Murphy Connor of Westminster, England, and of course, Walter Cardinal Casper, and also the thoughts and ideas of Archbishop Quinn, who laid a lot of this out in a best-selling book of 1999 called The Reform of the Papacy. I'm going to quote Ivaro directly. He says, could someone get me a little drink of water? Just a little cup, please. Thank you. And we are coming to the end. But Martini and Daniels, he said, often dubbed by journalists as liberals or progressivists, were more accurately described as reformers. Okay, they want to give it a nicer name. Thank you very much. Reformers, reformisti. Reformisti. As opposed to the conservatives, who he calls the rigoristi, the rigorist. Okay? Now, there were two different emphases. The rigorist, listen to this, who dominated John Paul II's Curia. Okay? You can see how the shift in thinking is astounding. But anyway, there were two different emphases involved, he said, where the rigoristi wished church teaching to be clear and unambiguous, imagine that, the reformisti wished it to be credible in a pluralistic society. In other words, it wants to allow the sheep to dictate how they're going to be preached to. Or that terrific open letter that was just given by Bishop Jean Lenga of Kazakhstan. He said, he complains of the fact that in the new system, I'm quoting him now, the sinners give the church the instruction of how the church is to serve them. It's wonderful. But Ivare continues. He says, behind these two tendencies, the rigoristi and the reformisti, lurked two different ecclesiologies. Absolutely right. The rigoristi wanted to tighten Vatican control over questions of doctrine and discipline, where the reformisti, the reformers, wanted greater freedom in acting and applying church norms in local situations. The rigoristi like to close down debate, and the Vatican will do that. We are not talking, this is not a subject open to debate, okay, like women priests, okay? They hate that. They don't think that the Vatican should have the right to do that. The rigoristi like to close down debate, making clear that the norms were clear and unchanging. The reformisti, the reformers, preferred to keep some things open, basically everything open, except their own power, but everything open, some things open, believing that in matters of ecclesiastical discipline, rather than unchanging doctrine of the faith and morals, the local church should be the universal, should help the universal church discern the need for the changes in pastoral practice. Okay, so the periphery church is going to be informing and reforming the center of the church, but again, he makes this distinction. We're only talking matters of ecclesial discipline, not doctrine and morals. Again, we are faced with this constant false dichotomy of the alleged pastoral over the doctrinal. And, well, I kind of want to flatten this falsehood with an example, and I hope none of you are disturbed by the example that I give. But imagine if Father Violette invites me to come here, and he says, I want you to come, and I want you to give a talk on the sacrament of marriage and marital fidelity. So I come and I sit up here, and I give a picture-perfect talk from the Council of Trent, from the Catechisms, from Costi Connubii, from everything. Absolute perfect doctrine on the full Catholic teaching on marriage. But the whole time I'm up here, I have sitting on my lap a beautiful, shapely, 24-year-old woman who's not my wife. My wife's home in Buffalo. So I step off stage, and you say to me, I was scandalized by that presentation, and I respond, well, I didn't change doctrine. I kept the doctrine. Why are you upset? I kept the doctrine. This is the type of lunacy we get from the Vatican now. Pope Francis, we're not changing doctrine. Cardinal, we're not changing doctrine. We're just changing pastoral practice. The pastoral practice has to support the doctrine. But because the modernist new theology is based on modern false philosophies, and these false philosophies are not on speaking terms with the principle of non-contradiction, then anything is possible, and we get this type of lunacy. So, anyway, back to collegiality and synodality. They want to give national or local bishops' conference greater autonomy. Many reasons for doing this. One of them is for the sake of ecumenism. Now, John Paul II, in Ut Unum Sint, he did promise a reformation of the papacy along the lines of ecumenism, so it can be done, right? They could argue that. Also, they argue that we can't really make any ecumenical progress when we still have the Pope acting like the centrist monarch. They're not going to take us seriously. So for the sake of ecumenism, they want this new approach to the papacy. And here's Cardinal Ras. Here he is. You know, I like to say that the girl sitting on my lap, okay, you would think, I mean, if I said, no, I'm not changing the doctrine. I'm just proposing a reconciled infidelity, a reconciled diversity. This is how Cardinal Casper talks. When he's talking about giving all these local churches, national churches, greater autonomy, here's what he says. The ultimate aim is not a uniformed, The ultimate aim is not a uniformed, united church, but a church of reconciled diversity. Okay, we have yet another new term. Reconciled diversity, which means this thinking and the principle of non-contradiction are not on speaking terms. Okay? Reconciled infidelity, reconciled diversity. And this, unfortunately, is one of Archbishop Bergoglio's, Cardinal Bergoglio's, Pope Francis's favorite terms. In reference to ecumenism, that's how he talks. He tells a group of Pentecostals, Protestant Pentecostals, that he's interested in reconciled diversity, that he is interested in, he says, I am not looking to convert you, I'm looking that we just meet in the middle. Okay? Now, Bergoglio's mind in this way is one with the St. Gallen group and Archbishop Quinn. Now, I have mentioned Bergoglio's unqualified praise of Martini and his support of Martini's program, but also there's Archbishop Quinn. Now, Quinn, in his 1999 book, The Reform of the Papacy, he called for greater collegiality and synodality along the lines of Cardinal Martini. He called for a greater decentralization of the church's governance. He called for a method of choosing bishops that's more like that of the Anglicans and the Schismatic Orthodox. He denounced the Curia as a barrier between the Pope and the rest of the bishops. Sound familiar? Okay. He called for more self-government and regional patriarchs who will appoint their own bishops and also decide liturgical questions. He calls for a more decentralization, more horizontal communications, more internalization, and greater participation of laymen, particularly women, in decision-making offices in the Curia. Okay? That's what he called for. And just before the cardinals went into the 2013 conclave, less than 2 years ago, that elected Bergoglio as Pope, Cardinal Bergoglio happened to bump into Archbishop Quinn outside of a coffee shop in Rome. And Bergoglio said to Quinn, this is a direct quote, I've read your book, and I am hoping what it proposes will be implemented. Okay, I'll say it again. Bergoglio said to Quinn, I've read your book, and I'm hoping what it proposes is implemented. And Quinn himself told the story at a conference in St. Louis in June 2014. We are looking at the complete dismantling now, the complete fragmentation of unity. Because in his first apostolic exhortation, whatever it's called, Evangelium Gaudium, Francis signaled his intention to give bishops' conferences, listen to this, genuine doctrinal authority. The final word will not be Rome. The final word will be Timothy Dolan in his group, or Cardinal Marx in his group. See, this is the fragmentation of the universal church. Doctrine will be officially different from country to country. It's the way it has to work out. And they will do to doctrine what Vatican II did to the Mass. Everywhere you go, it's different. This opens the door for national churches that could be cut loose from the faith forever. England has never come back. It is 5 centuries later. But none of this matters to Casper or to Bergoglio, because they're all hepped up on what they see as this new reconciled diversity. So, Cardinal Marx, the final thing I'm going to say is we've read about Cardinal Marx, who has said the German church governs itself. We're not a subsidiary of Rome. He knows Bergoglio's thinking. He knows this is what the structure is going to be, and he's just stepping forward first. Here's what he said just a couple days ago. We are not subsidiaries of Rome. Head of the Bishops' Conference in Germany. We are not subsidiaries of Rome. Each conference of bishops is responsible for the pastoral care in its culture. Okay, the periphery defining. And must, as its most proper task, we cannot wait for a synod to tell us how we're going to have to shape pastoral care for marriage and the family. Okay, and this is one of the men on Bergoglio's cardinal, eight-man cardinal group to reform, I think deform, the Curia. So, what do? Very simple. We don't just long for the good old days of Pope Benedict and Summorum Pontificum. Good grief. I see so many so-called traditionalists just pawing at the door of Benedict saying, please come back, please come back. The thinking and practice of John Paul II gave us this. The thinking and practice of Ratzinger throughout his entire career as Vatican II being his center, immovable position is what gave us Pope Francis. Francis is just taking it all to the next logical stage in revolution. What will the bishops do? Well, I think we have a key, really, from what we get from Archbishop Lefebvre and Vatican II. I think many of you have probably heard this. Archbishop Lefebvre said at Vatican II, there are pretty much 10% hardcore liberals. On the other side, there were 10% what you would call hardcore conservatives. The remaining 80% would go whichever way the Pope went. And that's even with Cardinal Burke standing up. And there are a number of people, Archbishop Saba of Africa, they're standing up now. But the majority, I fear, will go with the Pope, because I think the bishops, the average diocesan bishop's criteria for direction is, which way is the wind blowing? What's the periphery telling me? Or what's the Pope doing? So, in conclusion, very simple. We are bound not to go back just to the good old days of Ratzinger, who even rabbis praised for institutionalizing revolution regarding going to the synagogue so often. No, we're bound to the unchanging doctrine of the Church, what I quoted earlier, to hold the Catholic truth in the same meaning and in the same explanation of the Church always taught, to teach our children well, and to be inflexible rigoristi. Not in a nasty way. We don't have to be nasty in any of this. And teach our children, because now we have traditionalist children who have grown up in tradition. And I think a lot of them really don't understand the full nature of this fight. They don't, in fact, some of them maybe kind of resent, I just want to be like the rest of my friends. What, I got to be going to a special school and wear a uniform? You do get that, okay? We have to try to instill in our children, in a happy manner, in a joyful manner, the true nature of this fight, give them something to fight for. And I also am a firm believer in going on the offensive. We should be way beyond defending our position. Well, we don't really like the council because of this and this, and I hope you don't mind, and this and this. No, we need to go on the offensive. Again, not in a nasty way, not in an arrogant way, but firmly, calmly, and backed with the facts, go on the offensive and publicly ask these church leaders, why are you not faithful to Catholic doctrine? Why do you love this catastrophe of Vatican II? Why do you love decay? Why do you love gangrene? Why You are effectively telling us to disobey all the popes of the past, so why should I obey you now? You've undercut your own authority. Why do you do this? Go on the offensive, and even if, they're not going to listen, but okay, it doesn't matter if they don't listen. You make a noise anyway because other people listen. Well, anything I write in Catholic Family News, I don't have one hope that it's going to change the mind of anybody, any person in that Vatican. I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for the faithful Catholics who are confused. Here's the answer. And we give the answer by going on the offensive and pointing out that they are the ones that need to be in the position of defending themselves because they are clearly out of bounds when it comes to the Catholic faith. Chesterton said, there are 1,000 angles by which a man may fall. There is only one angle in which he may stand upright. And that's what we have to teach our children. Tell them about the various angles, but also the way to stand upright. So we have, to wrap up, the triumph of the new theology that says the Catholic truth can change over time, gripping the minds of modern churchmen in the highest places. We have the triumph of the adoption of existentialism via the new theology that places primacy on the person over objective truth, where we end up with this crazy, this idea that pastoral should be more important than doctrine. But as we know, as Father Greenstock warned in 1950, once pastoral practice is essentially separated from doctrine, then any aberration is possible. And that man's prophecy, prophetic understanding, we're seeing playing itself out right now. So we keep the faith, we also keep to the philosophy and learn the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas, which is a detailed exposition of what we all know instinctively. We keep to the message of Fatima, pray a great deal for the Holy Father, and even if it is true that we're living in apocalyptic times, we've read the end of the book, and we know who wins at the end. So we remember the words of Scripture in all this, be faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Copyright Sound Production, Oltyn Library Services, all rights reserved. This recording may not be reproduced without explicit permission of Oltyn Library Services. This recording is produced by Oltyn Library Services. Visit us on the web at www.oltyn.org. That's www.oltyn.org, oltyn.org, or write to us at Oltyn Library Services, 2316 Delaware Avenue, PMB 325, Buffalo, New York, 14216. Please check our website or ask for our catalog of traditional Catholic cassettes, CDs, and DVDs.